Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest on what is going on up in the stratosphere. And of course we had an update out about 2 weeks ago. We did see there were some increasing signals that we could see a warming occurring up in the stratosphere in late February or early March. Now those signals and hints have strengthened considerably, and we are now looking quite likely at seeing a fairly major warming up in the stratosphere. Potentially even a major sudden stratospheric warming where those winds do reverse and we see easterlies instead of westerlies high up in the stratosphere. And of course this could have profound impacts on the early to middle portion of the spring, increasing the chances of blocking patterns, potentially dragging colder air back on our shores. Of course we've got fairly spring-like conditions over the next week or so, but it could be a bit of a false dawn and we can instead see those colder conditions return into the middle second half of the month. Now I want to put it out there, I don't expect to see anything on the level of a beast from the east or anything like that, which we saw in 2018 from a similar sudden stratospheric warming. That sudden stratospheric warming occurred about 5 weeks earlier, early February, not into early March, and that makes a big difference. And of course, now the daylight is a lot longer, sun strength is a lot higher, and air masses are slowly warming. So it means that anything on that level is pretty much impossible. But we could still see well below average temperatures, well below freezing overnight temperatures, and potentially some winteriness as well, especially in the north. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So we'll run through all the latest data from both the GFS and the ECMWF for complete transparency, just show you what is going on and all the likelihoods, of course, looking at both anomaly and ensemble charts. We'll start on the GFS. Of course, you can see at the moment, we have got this big blue lobe above the North Pole. Now, we'll briefly explain what is going on up in the stratosphere in general, and how a warming in the stratosphere could have impacts on the surface. Now, of course, I have explained this numerous times in prior videos and in our winter look aheads, so if you do already know all of this, do skip ahead a few minutes and do avoid this explanation that, of course, I want to give, because in case any new viewers are watching and want to understand why this could have profound impacts. Essentially, this big lobe of blue high up in the stratosphere is cold air that forms over the winter and is called the polar vortex. And that's because the contrast between this very cold air and the warmer air towards the mid-latitudes, this orangey colours that we've got around this big lobe of blue, that creates a pressure difference, and we see winds going around the North Pole. Now, because of the rotation of the Earth, we see winds going from a west to easterly direction, and these are the very strong stratospheric winds, the big polar vortex high up in the atmosphere, winds travelling hundreds of miles an hour, high up in the atmosphere. We're talking way above where our weather takes place. This is where sort of aeroplanes are flying. Now, how does this impact our surface conditions? It's because all levels of the atmosphere in some sort of level are connected. And essentially, high up in the atmosphere, if we got lots of westerly momentum in the polar vortex, very strong polar vortex, it drags through the atmosphere, and we see that westerly momentum carry on down to the surface, down towards the troposphere. It doesn't form the jet stream. That's formed by pressure differences at our level, at the troposphere level. But what it does do is it can strengthen it, give it more momentum, and allow the jet stream to really power up. And that's why we see lots of stormy spells during the winter. We've got a very strong polar vortex. It can add to that momentum and really power up the jet stream. However, if we saw a warming high up in the atmosphere, it disturbs the polar vortex. It splits it or even reverses it, where very warm air penetrates into the Arctic, and what we see is those westerly winds reverse to easterlies. And with easterly momentum, this again can propagate through the atmosphere and can significantly weaken the jet stream at our level in the atmosphere, potentially distorting the jet stream, amplifying it. And of course, with warm air high up in the polar vortex, it replaces the cold air, which forms an area of low pressure, with higher pressure, and that higher pressure can propagate through the atmosphere as well. So essentially, it increases the chance of the jet stream being weaker, it increases the chance of amplification in the jet stream, and it increases the chance of blocking areas of higher pressure. And of course, no warming up in the stratosphere is the same, so we can never say exactly what we're going to see, where high pressure is going to set up, where the distortion in the jet stream will set up either. So that's why it's always very unpredictable, but it does increase the chances of the sort of weather patterns that can cause colder weather. So that's essentially a very quick explanation why this could have profound impacts. And as we head into the spring months, this could allow us to drag very cold air that's still above the Arctic back towards Northern Europe and Western Europe and keep us below average in colder conditions when we want to be seeing some sunshine and some warmth. Now, everything I've just explained will be a lot easier to visualise as we run through this latest GFS. You can see that blue continues to circle around the North Pole. But look at this, a big area of warming forms over Siberia, pushes into the Arctic, this big area of warmth, of higher pressure, and it completely displaces the polar vortex. And high above the North Pole, we've got these reds now occurring, with it actually being colder outside the North Pole. And what we see is those winds, instead of being an easterly, they reverse to westerlies. And we can put on the 10 HPA winds. And look at that. Instead of earlier on going from a west to east direction, look at this. This big area of high pressure replaces it. And look where the wind direction is going now. It is going in from the east. And what this will do is go through the atmosphere, propagate areas of high pressure, propagate this easterly momentum throughout the atmosphere, and increase the chances of high pressure blocking and generally distortions and potential areas of the jet stream that could weaken significantly amplification or could have impacts on the troposphere. So you can see here a pretty major sudden stratospheric warming taking place. The temperature high up above the North Pole is getting exceptionally warm, and we do see those winds reverse. And yeah, this is just a classic displacement event. Sometimes we can see splits in the polar vortex where these blues are not just pushed out of the Arctic, but they're split. And that could have a devastating effect on the polar vortex. And that could really send conditions pretty awry, as we do see all matter of disturbances throughout the atmosphere. Not looking likely in this case, but it basically ends the polar vortex and potentially could end it for this winter. Normally, in mid-April or early April, we see the demise of the polar vortex as the sun strengthens, the daylight increases across the northern hemisphere. We essentially see the demise of the polar vortex as it warms up over the North Pole. That is a natural process, but it could be accelerated by this major sudden stratospheric warming. Now, this is one singular run. What are the other operational GFS runs been showing over the past few days? This chart is very simple. Each line is a GFS midnight run from the last 4 or 5 days. So you can see here, the 1st of March, 28th of Feb, 27th of Feb, 26th of Feb, red, green, orange, and blue. And you can see the 26th didn't quite get a reversal in those zonal mean winds. You can see this on the left. This is the strength of those westerly winds in meters per second. So starting at 50 meters per second. And you can see in about 7 to 10 days' time, we do see the winds weaken significantly down towards zero. And the last 3 runs have got those mean winds to zero, if not reversing them. Zero is the threshold for sudden stratospheric warming, a major warming, as we do see it reverse from a westerly to an easterly. So the last 3 out of 4 midnight runs have produced that. Now, this is an ensemble view. This is the zonal mean winds high up at 10 HPA for the whole of the past 6 months or so, go all the way back to August, where we have gone from seeing no polar vortex to the start of September, the polar vortex forming, being pretty strong, and the blue line here is what's actually happened. The orange lines are different percentiles, and the black line is the normal mean, what we'd expect to see. So you can see it's been fairly strong throughout much of this winter, and this next line, this thicker blue line, is the average on the GFS ensembles. Greens are the individual ensembles, and you can see that progressively over the next few weeks, we do have a very high chance of getting exceptionally strong weakening, and of course, a lot of ensemble members get to a complete reversal. You can see the ensemble mean is hovering just about 0, 1, maybe slightly below, So it's pretty much just on the threshold of a sudden stratospheric warming here from the ensemble mean. But of course, that takes into account some of these slightly weaker warmings where we do remain in that positive westerly momentum. So you can see here, the ensembles are fairly in line with the operational run, with most around the 10th to 12th, maybe 13th, 14th, getting us towards major southern stratospheric warming territory. Another way to view this is by having a look at this as a cross-section. This is the latest GFS 6 o'clock run from this morning. So this is the different pressure levels on the left. So we're looking at 1,000, 850 HPA, which is near our surface towards the troposphere. And then 1 HPA is right up at the top of the stratosphere, which stretches down to around 10 to 30 HPA as well. And you can see all these yellows and oranges. That's positive westerly momentum. And then look at this big lobe of purple appearing. And this is where that major warming occurs, and we see the winds reversing from westerly, so positive territory, to negative territory. This is off the scale, this 6 o'clock run. I highly doubt it will be this strong, but this is probably one of the strongest reversals I've ever seen from a GFS run. So this black here, that's off the scale, off the bottom of this scale, down towards negative 45 meters per second. That is insane, and we'd expect to see this slowly propagate potentially through the atmosphere. Not seeing these sort of negative levels at the surface. You can see the surface conditions are much weaker. They're nowhere near as sort of overwhelmingly strong as higher up in the atmosphere. But we would expect to see this momentum, this easterly momentum, propagate through the atmosphere. Already, any of these yellows disintegrate in that longer term. And as I said, that is where we could start to see during the middle to second half of March, blocking patterns, distortion of the jet stream, amplification occur. And even a better view for this is on the anomaly view. This is showing this all compared to average, and it shows a bit more of a stark contrast here. At the moment, we're around 10 to 15 meters per second above what we'd expect to see this time of year. Potentially in a couple of weeks of time, we're 65 meters per second below what we expect to see this time of year. So about an 80 meter per second swing potentially within the next 10 days in those zonal mean winds within the stratosphere. So pretty insane. Now this is just the GFS. If we compare it to the ECMWF, it is very similar. This is the next week, that warming occurring, but not quite penetrating right into the Arctic yet. The following week, into the middle of March, the Arctic has been fully penetrated by this major warming, and it pretty much dominates much of the next few weeks and doesn't look likely to reduce too much as we head into mid-April. At this point, we would expect to see the polar vortex demise, but it's occurring about a month earlier. And if we look at the ECMWF ensembles, it's pretty much exactly the same. Got this major warming occurring in the next 10 days or so, around the 12th, 14th of March. That's when we'd expect to see those winds potentially reverse. Not 100% run showing it, but it is similar to the GFS with a mean just about gets to zero. There's a bit of a recovery in the polar vortex here from the ECMWF ensembles, and then we do see a full demolishment of the polar vortex in the last few days of March into early April. So perhaps a slight strengthening, still well below the red line, which is the mean, but a slight strengthening before it does subside for the winter of 2024-2025, a good few weeks earlier than we would expect. As I said, that red line is what we'd expect to see this time of year, and you can see it slowly weakens over the next few weeks naturally. That is just what occurs during the early spring. And you can see around mid-April, that's when we'd expect it to cross the zero, and that's when we start to head into the summer months. But you can see it's occurring much, much earlier this year, and as I said, it could have profound impacts as we do head into the second half of March and even into early April. So yeah, very interesting seeing this. Of course, it's very good that we spotted this a couple of weeks ago, saw those hints, and they have continued to strengthen. And as I said, now within the next sort of 10 to 14 days, we are expecting to see a major warming and potentially a sudden stratospheric warming. Things can change very quickly, but considering the signal we're seeing here, I highly doubt that we'll see anything too different than what is occurring within the models here. Maybe we won't see a complete reversal. Maybe it'll stay 5 meters per second. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But a major warming, a major weakening in the the momentum within the polar vortex and probably generally throughout the atmosphere is looking very, very likely now. As I said, could have profound impacts in the coming weeks. So we'll have to keep a very close eye on this in our daily videos as well. So I am expecting to see quite a few blocking patterns appearing. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I expect to see in the model output because of all of this propagating through the atmosphere in the next couple of weeks. I'm expecting to see some quite interesting charts, potentially some late winter, early spring. Of course, remember, we're into March now. Early spring, big cold and northerlies or easterlies. I'm expecting to see something like that. We've seen it in past winters, some massive colder blasts. Again, not expecting anything too major because we are now into spring. It becomes increasingly impossible to see anything majorly cold, but definitely the possibility of some winteriness, very cold conditions, and pretty unseasonable, potentially late March into early April. Of course, April, we can start to see temperatures widely into the around the 20 degree mark, potentially second half of April, even into the mid-20s, late 20s has been seen in prior years. I think 27, 28 degrees we've got up to in prior Aprils. But if this occurs, then that could become a myth for this year. We'll have to wait and see, of course. I'll keep you updated. But yeah, very interesting today. And it'll be one to keep a very close eye on, both in our videos over the coming days and what it has in terms of the longer term prospects as well. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you again for another video soon.